And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that. I came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. I looked at her, I said, "No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts.
It's going to get real serial tonight because we're going to talk about serial killers.
Amen.
In our new series where we cover freaking serial killers from every freaking state.
The most notorious in every state. Bam.
What are we drinking tonight?
We are drinking Bewilder from Brewing Co. Whoa. It's the Bewilder Brewing Co. Desert IPA.
Yeah, I'm just bewildered right now.
But what is it called? I thought it was called Bewilder, but it says Bewilder Brewing Co. Desert IPA. Huh.
All I know is it's interesting. It's an IPA with honey in it.
Did you not like it? Your first facial expression didn't.
I wasn't expecting a taste of something sweet. You know, when I drink a beer,
sweet?
I like to just be a beer. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's an IPA. I thought like the honey would be kind of like not sweet, just kind of like
it's all right. Honey. You know, it surprised me. You know, the only thing I like in my beer is generally I like the apricot Hefeweizens, but you know I got to be in the right spot for that.
Right.
You know,
it smells kind of sweet though.
It's pretty good. I don't dislike it.
Okay.
It's not a punch to the face like the Big Baptist.
Yeah,
but,
the Big Baptist.
It's just kind of like a little nice slap to the face. Just like a.
Yeah, the Baptist was a full-on assault to the mouth. This is just like a little love kiss right in the cheek. Like, hey, here's some honey. I watched a YouTube short last week, and I texted Cleet to watch it. Oh, hi, Ginger. Got a cat friend now. But if anyone is interested in little YouTube horror shorts, you should watch Intruders. There is a scene literally within the first few minutes that genuinely scared me.
Yeah, you know, Britton sent this to me via, a link, and I watched it too. You know, I love the YouTube horror shorts because, they're pretty good, but some of them get a little too artsy. But this one was good. This scene was good. Tell us the scene. What happened?
Not to spoil anything too much. It's a little short, but there's this, I'm assuming young adult, older teen in his apartment complex, and he's looking out across the other complex with a little fucking telescope thing. It's like the old school pirate telescope.
He was being a peeping Tom.
Yeah. And he sees this creepy old woman strangling the shit out of this other person across the way. And she makes eye contact with him, boom. And then she starts, she points at him, right? And then she starts to leave the complex, and he's like, oh shit, got busted. And then all of a sudden, he looks down in the street, and she is bolting across the street towards his apartment complex. And that's it. It's crazy.
It was a good one. YouTube shorts, man. Watch them.
Really good. Called Intruders. Just YouTube shorts.
My favorite is Fridge Man. Check that one out. I will not tell you the actual plot line of it. It's pretty scary.
It involves a fridge.
Changed my life. I can't open fridges the same way again.
God damn, how will your beers ever be cold?
I know. I just have warm beer from now on and spoiled cabbage.
Ooh. I think that's a delicacy in some places.
Oh my God.
But like Cleet said, we are starting a brand new series, which is the most notorious serial killers in every state, covering the first 5 states this week.
Okay, so the way this will work is we'll be covering the first 5 states every episode. So if you remember your state song, it goes
Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California.
So that's what we'll be covering.
I was going to keep going.
No,
Colorado,
we gotta stop.
Connecticut.
We gotta stop.
All right.
Shut up.
God
damn it.
Shut your mouth and have a little sip of honey.
I just want to talk about serial killers.
All right. Well, that leads us to Alabama.
Hang on. Did we not acknowledge that segment at the start? That guy was crying about killing his mom like it wasn't even a choice.
Yeah, spoiler alert. That's the 3rd state I'm covering.
I'm just detracting way too much here, but what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
What?
That was one of the more docile interviews from that gentleman.
She just said, oh, you want to talk about your day? And I'm like, no, Ma, I gotta kill you.
Well, when I talk about it, you'll know. His mom was kind of a bitch.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
But we're starting with Alabama, which the most notorious serial killer in that state was Thomas Warren Wisenhant. So Thomas Warren Wisenhant was born on January 29th, 1947, died on May 27th, 2010. Before I go any further, though, obviously, just to kind of clarify, because we are doing 5 per episode, we're going to do like a high level, like talk a little bit about what made them so creepy, some of their stuff, but there's some that like obviously could go way further, which is like the third one I'm doing. Even the Cliff Notes is a long one, so we're just going to be talking briefly about these fucking sickos. But anyway, back to Thomas. He was an American serial killer who murdered at least 4 women between 1963 and 1976 in Mobile County, Alabama. So when he was arrested in October of 1976 for the murder of Cheryl Payton, he confessed to the murders of the 3 other women. He was sentenced to death in Alabama in September of 1977 and executed in May of 2010 at Holman Correctional Facility via lethal injection. During his time there, he was the longest-serving death row inmate, spending a whopping 32 years and 8 months on death row.
I'd be like, just kill me already. Like,
Right.
man, I'm done.
32 years waiting for your death.
Send me to the Undertaker.
Dude, that's more than my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm 31.
Not me. I'm 34. I'm wiser.
But can you imagine, like, all of your years being spent on death row right now?
I would just send random letters to people trolling them.
I think what guy was it? The Vampire Sacramento. But it was more of like he got love letters confessing everyone's love for him.
Everyone like
Sick
loves
ass.
serial killers. It's so strange to me. Women are like, I love him. Like, he would have murdered you.
He would cut your fucking head off. Okay, so we're going to get into some of the details that made him the most notorious serial killer in Alabama. Dude, he probably would have cut their head off. That's what he did. That's what serial killers do. They're like, your head needs to leave your body. Okay, so a little bit of backstory. Thomas was the last of 4 children born to Willie and Emma Wisenhant. They were a low-income family led by his mother, who was described as a domineering woman that would constantly argue and attack her physically weak and alcoholic husband. So she is battering the hell out of her husband. Sadly, she also encouraged her children to do the same.
Hit him! Hit him! Charles, get in here. Let's hit him.
So they're literally, the whole family is just beating on the dad.
He's drunk again. Hit him.
Just hit him. So the whole family just beats the shit out of the father. Just a happy home life. Most of these attack sprees would start by Thomas's father getting absolutely blitzed on moonshine and then trying to seduce his mother, to which was always rejected.
Hit him. Hit him.
Hit him.
Kids aren't even yours.
Oh my God. Boys, he's coming on to me. Get him. Get him. Kick
Hello,
him in the
mother.
head.
Let's hit father.
So instead, he just got beaten. Never had the fun stuff. So she seemed to only have hate and resentment towards her husband and claimed to be overprotective and even spoil Thomas, including having him share a bed with her until the age of 7. They continued to share a room until he turned 16, when, according to his sister, he became moody and violent. I wonder why. Thomas was said to never leave his mother's side, and according to a psychiatrist, he resented his mother completely. So now that we have some clarification on his childhood, we're going to jump into the murders. On May 6th, 1963, police arrived on scene of the grisly shooting of 72-year-old Lexi Haynes, who was a widow. She had been shot in Pritchard, and the murder weapon was found in an empty lot next to the Wisenhant family home. Thomas was 16 at the time and had previously been arrested for the robbery of a blind woman. Who does that? Who does that?
Pretty bird.
Which led him to immediately being a suspect in this. I didn't even think about that. Pretty bird. You sold my dead bird to a blind kid? I took care of it. Oh my God. I love that movie. According to a retired Pritchard police captain, the robbery charge was dismissed on a technicality. Gotta love when that happens. When asked about the murder, Thomas's family provided an alibi, claiming that he was with them during the time of the shooting. Before the shooting took place, Thomas and his friends were dicking around with a stolen handgun when a witness claimed Thomas had removed a bullet from the revolver, held it up in the air, and stated that this bullet would soon kill somebody. So he was already planning on it, man. Police revealed later that Haynes had confronted Thomas about this behavior, which could have led to the murder, but for unknown reasons, Wisenhant was never brought to trial. Sometime after the shooting, Thomas joined the United States Air Force as an airman and was stationed at Ent Air Force Base near Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is the kind of guy you want in the Air Force, right?
Yeah.
Stealing from the blind people. On October 25th, 1965, he attacked Rose Covington, who was 22 years old, also on the United States Air Force. He had beaten her unconscious with a metal ashtray in the finance office of the base. Rose suffered severe head and facial injuries and spent 2 months in the hospital. At Thomas's trial, she testified that she had never even met him and didn't even know what he looked like. A lab expert for the FBI linked Thomas to the scene via shoe prints which were left behind that matched. Wisenhant continued to deny the attack, but ultimately was convicted of assault with intent to commit murder on March 14, 1966, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison with hard labor. He faced a reduce in rank, ordered to forfeit all pay, and dishonorably charged from the Air Force. In 1970, his sentence was reduced to 10 years, and on November 28, 1973, was granted parole. On November 21st, 1975, Wisenhant attacked 28-year-old Patricia Hitt, who was a mother of two and was working in a convenience store in Mobile County, Alabama. He approached her, beat her, and ultimately fatally shot her in the back of the head. Originally, 2 other men were arrested for this crime, but on April 16, 1976, Thomas kidnapped and murdered another female convenience store worker in Mobile. Her name was Venora Hyatt, and she was 44 years old. Thomas had kidnapped her from the store, took her to an old abandoned house covered in kudzu vines. He murdered her and dumped her body near an abandoned shack. The next day, he returned to the scene and mutilated her body. He then took off her wristwatch, gave it to his wife as a present. Oh, what a thoughtful gentleman.
Wow.
On October 16, 1976, Thomas abducted 23-year-old Cheryl Lynn Payton, another convenience store clerk in Mobile. He took her to a remote wooded area, held her at gunpoint, raped her in the front seat of his pickup truck, and then fatally shot her in the head with a .32 caliber pistol point blank. He dragged her body into the woods nearby before fleeing the scene. On October 17th, Wisenhant returned to the scene and mutilated Payton's body again. He cut off a large part of her breast and slashed her abdomen. This return to the scene was his mistake, however, as he was spotted, and after a chase was ultimately captured by police. During his interrogation, he went on to give very detailed confessions to all of his murders. This is where he admitted to the murders of Hitt and Hyatt months prior. Later, he would admit to murdering Haynes when he was a teenager, and he confessed to the assault on Covington and the attacks of 2 other women, one of which was his wife. He claimed that the only rape he ever committed was Payton. The trial began on August 1st, 1977. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but on August 9th, he was found guilty of capital murder, and on September 7th was sentenced to death. In September 1977, 26-year-old Kenneth Lynn Curry, who was the son of Venora Hyatt, one of his victims, kidnapped and robbed a taxi driver. He claimed that he committed this crime so he could go into jail and murder Wisenhant to avenge his mother.
Nice.
So
Get him.
He was hoping to kill him.
Get him. I'd be like, you know what? You're going to share a cell with him. Here's a gun.
Here's your new cell, buddy.
Here's a gun with 1 bullet.
Oh no, the camera's malfunctioned.
What, they're going to Epstein him?
Thomas's original conviction was later reversed by the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, which resulted in him being retried, which happened in 1981, which led to his conviction again. This conviction was upheld, however, his death sentence was overturned due to a remark made by a prosecutor during the sentencing phase of his trial. A new hearing was done in 1987, and Wisenhant was again sentenced to death. He went on to avoid execution for more than 3 decades as a result of successful appeals and prosecutorial errors. In November 2009, Assistant Attorney General Clay Crenshaw filed a motion asking the Supreme Court to finally set an execution date for Wisenhant and was scheduled for May 27, 2010. This is when he met his end via lethal injection. His last meal was chicken leg quarters, french fries, American cheese, orange drink, coffee, and chocolate pudding. He declined a final statement. So there you go,
See ya.
Mr. Wisenhant.
Go to hell.
Oh, he's going straight to hell.
All right, the next one is Alaska, who had Robert Hansen, the butcher baker. You want a side of rolls with a severed limb?
The butcher baker?
Yeah.
Like he's a butcher?
Yeah, did you want a
baker
cinnamon
who
roll and a
butches?
stab to the chest?
Or is he butchering bakers?
Do you want a full loaf of bread while I fucking hit you with a car?
Yes, please.
All right.
Hit me with the car first, though.
In the mid-1970s, construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline brought swarms of people to Anchorage, turning it into a boomtown of oilmen, construction workers, and a vice economy of illegal drugs and sex and rock and roll.
Damn.
You into that?
This sounds like I need to go to Alaska.
Yeah. A frontier town in the last frontier state, Anchorage was being settled by people who'd left it all behind. Those without roots of community ties, those starting afresh, those whom, if they disappeared from their new Alaskan homes, would hardly be missed. So, when Anchorage's sex workers began disappearing in the late 1970s, it went unnoticed. But on September 2nd, 1983, state troopers were put on alert. That's when the body of a 17-year-old exotic dancer, Paula Golding, was found on the banks of the Nick River by a road construction crew. She'd been missing for over 5 months, and her remains were found near those of another 23-year-old exotic dancer, Sherry Moreau.
Damn.
There were .223 shell casings near the bodies of both women. Ballistics reports showed that they had been fired from the same high-powered hunting rifle. Far from the burgeoning city they'd lived. Far from the burgeoning city where they'd lived, out in the Alaskan wild, they had been hunted down like wild animals. The land of the midnight sun had a serial killer on its hands named Robert Hansen, the butcher baker.
On his hands, named Robert Hansen.
Oh, my hands, they just want to hurt. There was nothing on the surface that raised red flags about Robert Hansen, the unassuming Anchorage native who eventually confessed to killing 17 women in the Alaskan wilderness.
Holy Lord.
He'd moved to Alaska from Iowa in the 1960s before the pipeline boom. He was married with 2 children. He was a successful small business owner, having opened a bakery in the city's downtown.
What is this, Sweeney Todd?
Yeah. You want a cinnamon roll and a stab to the face?
You want a clean razor shave right to the throat?
The cops went there for coffee and donuts all the time. Frank Rothschild, the assistant district attorney who tried Hansen's case, said, if anything, Hansen came across as mousy, a scrawny man with a stutter. It was the stutter that made it hard for Hansen to talk to girls during his adolescence. He found an outlet for his feelings of sexual rejection and frustration through criminality, first via smaller displays of power like kleptomania, then graduating to arson, burning down a school bus garage in his hometown of Pocahontas, Iowa in the 1960s, a crime for which he served 20 months in prison.
School bus?
He had like some bad happen on the school bus, and he's just like, I'm gonna burn it down. I'm gonna hurt the school bus.
Last time I was on a school bus, nothing good happened. No one gets school buses anymore.
He was an avid hunter, and after marrying and resettling in Alaska, he got his pilot's license and was purchased a small airplane ostensibly for hunting in the Alaskan bush. Although accused of rape as early as 1971, Hansen didn't really come onto police radar until June 13, 1983, when Cindy Paulson, an Anchorage sex worker, was picked up half-naked and handcuffed, hitchhiking and hysterical on the Alaskan highway.
Good Lord.
When police questioned Paulson, she described an abduction that seemed too horrific to be true. She'd been picked up in the car from a wiry, scruffy man soliciting her for sex. Paulson said she was handcuffed to the vehicle and threatened with a revolver, and then taken to the man's home, where he chained her from the ceiling of his den and raped and tortured her repeatedly. From there, Paulson was brought to a small local airport where she made her escape while her perpetrator loaded up his bush plane. When police took Paulson to the airport, she identified Hansen's plane. A security guard there corroborated her story and said he'd taken down the license plate of the perpetrator. That vehicle belonged to Robert Hansen, and when police went to the address listed on the vehicle registration, the interior of the home matched the description of Paulson had given. We had him pretty cold on the kidnapping and rape case, says Rothschild, a case which was eerily like what we were suspecting was happening to all these other women. FBI profiler John Douglas took information that troopers had gathered about those other known victims and developed a criminal profile of the suspect. The perpetrator would have a low self-esteem, he surmised, and would likely suffer from a speech impediment. The description matched. Rothschild obtained a search warrant for Hansen's home, and they discovered jewelry from several missing women, a rifle that matched the bullet casings found at the murder scene, and a map of the Alaskan bush with dozens of X marks stored in the headboard of Hansen's bed. At the Hansen's interrogation, Rothschild said that he had another DA explain that to Hansen their plan to wait until the spring thaws, go with tracking dogs to every spot on Hansen's map and search for the bodies and bullet casings that matched his weapons. As I sat there watching Hansen, there was a transformation that took place that was just amazing, says Rothschild. His face got really red, and literally the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and that's when he changed, to my eye, from Bob the Baker to Bob the serial killer.
Bob the Baker.
I'm gonna get you.
Can we bake it?
I'm gonna
Yes,
bake you to
we
hell.
can.
And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this guy thinking, there's the guy who killed all those people. Realizing the jig was up, Hansen confessed to 17 murders in exchange for an easier time through the criminal process. Alaska didn't have a death penalty, but Hansen requested that he be imprisoned out of state to lessen the chance of running across people who knew him or his victims, and that his case would be kept out of major media. Rothschild's office agreed to the terms, and Hansen was sentenced to life plus 461 years. He died in 2014 at the age of 75. Rothschild said that he doesn't regret being unable to pursue the death penalty. I would have wished every breath he took had an element of pain to it. But here's how I thought about it. Here's a guy whose passion in life was going out into the wilderness and hunting the great Alaska wild. Instead of being able to do that, he was put in a cell with no view of anything, forget the mountains, with rancid air and horrific people around him. That, to me, is supreme punishment. As for his own life path, Hansen's case marked the end of Rothschild's career in criminal law. When you're doing that kind of work, you see a portion of the world that's pretty dark. You're just so involved with all these horrible life situations, and it wears on you. And the ultimate was the Hansen case. It doesn't get darker than that. Soon after the case was resolved, Rothschild packed up his belongings and moved to Hawaii to retire happily.
Damn. If there's ever a case that does it. Did you ever work as like a criminal investigator like that?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me that much.
I used to want to do crime scene stuff when I was younger.
There's a lot of trashy people that do trashy things. Yeah.
Degenerates. That brings us to the state of Arizona. We're going to talk about Mark Goudeau, a.k.a. the Baseline Killer. Mark Goudeau was born on September 6th, 1964. He's an American serial killer, kidnapper, thief, and rapist who terrorized victims in the Phoenix metro area between August 2005 and June 2006. He was convicted of 9 murders, but also an extensive crime spree of 84 other felony charges, equaling a total of 93 felonies over a 10-month period. Just like you when you were in your 20s.
Yeah, I called that a Tuesday.
Yeah. He faced 2 separate trials for rape, assault, sexual assault, robbery, kidnapping, etc.
I didn't do that.
So, not a good guy in the slightest. All but one of his victims were female. He was ultimately sentenced to death 9 times and given a total sum of 1,634 years in Arizona State Prison. So let's get into the details of this twisted son of a bitch. So not much is talked about of his childhood, so we really don't have a lot of information to discuss there, so we're jumping right into the crimes that made him the most notorious in Arizona. Goudeau was first referred to as the Baseline Killer or Baseline Rapist when Phoenix police made the announcement of a light-skinned black male had been sexually assaulting females as young as 12 years old at gunpoint near Baseline Road. In the spring of 2006, he was dubbed the Baseline Killer after he was linked to a series of murders and armed robberies, which would later spread north, primarily in the north-central area of Phoenix, Arizona. Goudeau was believed at the time to have committed 9 counts of first-degree murder, 8 women, 1 man, in addition to 15 sexual assaults on women and young girls, 11 counts of kidnapping, and a number of armed robberies. They were not initially linked as they appeared to as they appeared to have no apparent motive, and the murders themselves were very brutal, as the murderer often shot the victims in the head. The criminal was often described as wearing various disguises, such as Halloween masks or impersonating a homeless man or drug addict.
Oh, not like a mustache and some glasses?
Right? The shell casings at each scene came from the same gun, and Phoenix police spent thousands of hours patrolling the area, following up on various tips during that summer of 2006. God, summers in Phoenix are hot as shit.
Yeah.
Residents of Phoenix obviously became alarmed at the violence taking place in their hometown as police sketches began going up based on descriptions of the survivors. They were blanketed all over billboards offering $100,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. It took police over a year to come up with a viable suspect. On November 3rd, 2005, Goudeau performed a robbery on North 32nd Street. He had dreadlocks and a fisherman's hat, walked in, robbed the location at gunpoint for a total of $720. Less than 10 minutes later, he abducted a woman, placing items in a parking lot donation bin across the street. He sexually assaulted her in her car and demanded that she drive him to the corner as he had just committed a robbery. On December 12, 2005, at 6:55 p.m., Tina Washington, a 39-year-old, was on her way home from the preschool that she worked at. A witness said they spotted a man with a drawn gun standing over her body behind a fast food restaurant. She had been shot in the head and killed. On March 15, 2006, 2 employees of Yoshi's restaurant on 24th Street and Indian School Road were on their way home in the same vehicle. Liliana Sanchez Cabrera, who was 20, was found dead in the parking lot of another fast food restaurant, and Chow Chu was discovered about a mile away, both having been shot in the head. On June 29, 2006, Carmen Miranda, who was 37, was washing her car at a self-serve car wash when she was abducted by Goudeau while on her cell phone. She was found dead with a gunshot wound to the head behind a barber shop. This attack had been captured on closed-circuit television and is the last crime attributed to the baseline killer. So during the time this was happening, Goudeau was on community supervision, also known as parole, with the Arizona Department of Corrections. In August of 2006, parole officers provided information to the police department stating that Goudeau matched the description being given. This led to the search of Goudeau's residence, where they found a ski mask and a realistic toy handgun. This led to a search warrant of the residence where additional items were found linking him to the crimes of the baseline killer. On September 4th, 2006, Mark Goudeau was arrested in connection to the sexual assault of 2 Phoenix sisters. One of the sisters was very visibly pregnant during the attack. The assault took place in a Phoenix City park on September 20th, 2005. Goudeau was connected via DNA evidence collected shortly after the crime. On September 7th, 2007, he was tried and convicted of all 19 charges relating to the attack on the sisters and was sentenced on December 14th, 2007 to 438 years in prison. On November 30th, 2011, a Phoenix jury sentenced him to the death on the murder charges relating to the baseline killings and is currently held on death row in ASPC Florence awaiting execution.
Damn.
So there's Arizona for you. Still waiting to die.
All right. This one is the Phantom Killer of Arkansas.
Do you say Phantom because he's not caught?
Arkansas.
Arkansas.
You ever put some Arkansas on your steak?
Arkansas. You either are Kansas or you aren't Kansas.
God, it's just goddamn great. In 1946, the town of Texarkana, which straddles the state line between Texas and Arkansas,
You're not even going to fix it?
was rocked by a series of brutal attacks that ultimately left 5 people dead and 3 gravely injured. What the media quickly dubbed was that Texarkana moonlight murders carried out by a shadowy figure the local paper called the Phantom Killer sent the small southern city into a panic. According to the New York Daily News, the terror began on February 22nd, when a date that was going pretty well ended in tragedy. Jimmy Hollis, 25, and Mary Jeanne, Larry, 19, had gone to see a movie and then went to park at the local Lover's Lane. Yeah, all right.
The local Lover's Lane.
But their tryst was interrupted by a man wearing a white sack with eye and mouth holes cut into it, shining a flashlight
ghost?
into their car. Maybe.
Ooh, I'm here to disrupt your sex.
I am the ultimate cock block.
You shall not sex in this land.
Not saying they were doing that. They were probably playing Uno. Seriously.
Oh,
probably just
probably.
playing Uno in the shower.
Reverse. Draw 4.
The old reverse
Suck
Uno.
it.
That'll get you. Oh, that'll
Reverse
get
Uno.
you.
No!
Ah! The man ordered Hollis to take his pants off.
Oh.
Then he beat him badly enough to put him into a coma for several days. He then caught up to Laurie as she tried to escape. He beat her as well and sexually assaulted her with the barrel of the gun he had threatened them with. The young lovers survived the attack but had differing reports of who carried it out. Laurie complained that the man had been black, despite not having seen his face. But Hollis said he believed the man to be white. The next victim of the Phantom Killer, however, would not be as fortunate as the first. The second attack came about a month after Hollis and Laurie were assaulted. Again, the victims were a couple of sweethearts out for a night of intimacy on the local Lover's Lane. But this time, the Phantom Killer didn't leave anyone alive. The bodies of Richard Griffin, 29, and Polly Ann Moore, 17, were discovered the following morning. They had both been shot several times in the back of the head. In April, Paul Martin, 16, and Betty Jo Booker, 15, were found murdered after a high school dance. They had also been shot to death. The term serial killer hadn't been coined yet. The FBI was brought in, as well as the Texas Rangers. Local gun shops enjoyed a flurry of business as people flocked to buy up firearms to defend themselves against a possible attack. Residents booby-trapped their houses with pots and pans full of silverware or old nails. Texarkana was on high alert. But despite the best efforts of the authorities, the violence continued. Virgil and Katie Starks were shot in their own home in May. Virgil, 37, was killed, but Katie made it to safety of a neighbor's house despite being hit in the face with 2 bullets. Jesus.
What? Hit in the face with 2 bullets and she lived?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know how long she lived. In June of that year, police arrested Ul Lee Swinney, 29, for stealing cars. But as they drove him to the station, the young man asked a strange question for someone accused of car theft. Will they give me the chair? This led police to suspect that they had ended up arresting the Phantom Killer. They were also told some incriminating stories by his wife Peggy, 21, whom they had arrested a few weeks earlier for the same thing. Unfortunately, the law barred Peggy from testifying against her husband, and the detectives lacked evidence strong enough to convict Swinney for murder. They put him behind bars for car theft. Swinney died in 1994, and no evidence has come out unequivocally proving whether or not he was a Phantom Killer. According to Texas Monthly, however, local journalist James Presley's book, The Phantom Killer, Unlocking the Mystery of the Texarkana Serial Killer Murders, the story of a town of terror, presented a compelling case for Swinney's guilt in 2014. I dare say every lawman who worked this case never quit mulling over the story over and over again in the hopes of turning up the hard evidence that could have convicted Swinney of the murders, Presley told the magazine. The killers were also an inspiration of the 1976 movie The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which Texarkana still shows each Halloween in a park near one of those crime scenes. Pretty dark stuff.
So we will end with good old California. And this was part of the clip we played at the very beginning of the show with none other than Ed Kemper.
They had to kill my mom.
So this is one of those really, really big ones that was really hard to condense down, but for the purposes of this series, covering just a snapshot, which is still really long. So I apologize, but this guy was a sick son of a bitch. But it'd be fun to do a deep dive at some point with this guy. But Edmund Emil Kemper III was born on December 18th, 1948. He's an American serial killer who murdered 10 people, including a 15-year-old girl, along with his mother and her best friend, from May of 1972 to April of 1973. He was given the name the Co-Ed Killer, seeing as most of his victims were female college students hitchhiking the area of Santa Cruz County, California. He's a big son of a bitch, standing at 6 feet 9 inches. To make shit worse, most of his murders included necrophilia, with several incidents of rape. So, trigger warning on this one. Kemp was born in Burbank, California, and to say he had a hard upbringing is definitely an understatement. He was the middle child and only son born to Clarnell Elizabeth Kemper and Edmund Emil Kemper Jr. His father was a World War II veteran who went on to test nuclear weapons at the Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California, where he worked as an electrician. He would later state that suicide missions in wartime and the atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to living with Clarnell. And that she affected him more. And that she affected him more than 396 days and nights of fighting on the front did.
That's good. That's amazing. Jesus.
So he was happy, right?
The horrors of war were not even close to the
my
horror
wife.
of you. That's funny.
It's bad. Okay, so Ed weighed 13 fucking pounds as a newborn and was always a head taller than his peers, starting at the age of 4. He started exhibiting antisocial behavior very on in life and began torturing insects and other animals, which, if you remember, was part of the McDonald triad. At only 10 years old, he buried a pet cat alive, and once it died, he dug it up, decapitated it, and mounted the head on a spike. He later stated that he found pleasure in lying to his family about killing the cat. At 13, he killed another family cat when he thought it was favoring his younger sister. He kept pieces of it in his closet until his mom found them. You know, most kids are like, fuck yeah, I'm going to keep my Playboys in the closet. This guy's like, nah, just bits of cat. Just bits of dead cat. As a kid, he had a very dark fantasy life, including rights with his sister's dolls that included cutting them apart.
I just played fucking video games, you know?
Exactly.
What the hell?
Yeah. He would sneak out of the house with his dad's bayonet, sneaking to his second grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows. He loved games that he called Gas Chamber and Electric Chair as a kid. And he would ask his younger sister to tie him up and flip an imaginary switch.
What the
Yeah,
hell?
this is a child. Not to mention almost being killed by his older sister on several occasions, like she pushed him in front of a train once or the deep end of a pool. Lots of crazy shit. So this is his childhood, right? Kemper was close to his dad and was torn apart at their divorce in 1957 and was forced to live with his mom in Montana. I mean, we all know how his dad felt about his mom, comparing it worse to warfare. His relationship with his mother was very dysfunctional, as she was a neurotic, domineering alcoholic who was often belittling, humiliating, and abused him. Kemp was forced to sleep in a rat-infested basement because she felt he would harm her and his sisters. His mother would often mock him for his large size, calling him a real weirdo, in phone conversations with his dad that she didn't think that he could hear. She mentioned that she was refusing to show him affection as she feared it would, quote-unquote, turn him gay. So she didn't even want to show him affection because of that fear. So she is just an awful...
She sounds like a horrible
human being.
Like, what the hell?
So the clip we played, and you're like, who's one of a... That's that lady.
Yeah.
This is the lady.
Okay.
So at 14, Kemp ran away from his home, hoping to reconcile with his father in Van Nuys, California. Once there, he had learned that his dad had remarried and had a stepson. Kemper stayed there for a while until his dad sent him to live with his paternal grandparents on a ranch in the foothills of Sierra Nevada on Road 224. He absolutely hated living there, describing his grandfather as senile, and said that his grandmother was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. This is unfortunately where his murder spree begins. On August 27, 1964, at only 15 years old, Kemper, who was sitting at the kitchen table with his grandma, Maud Matilda Kemper, broke out into an argument. Kemper stormed off, grabbed a rifle which had been given to him for hunting by his grandpa, which was previously taken away for needlessly shooting animals. He ran back into the kitchen, shooting his grandmother fatally in the head, then firing off 2 more shots into her back. Her last words to him were, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again." No, just you. Depending on the report, some state that she also had multiple post-mortem stab wounds with a kitchen knife. When his grandfather, Edmund Emil Kemper Sr., returned from grocery shopping, Kemper went out and fatally shot him in the driveway next to his car. Not knowing what to do next, he called his mother, who told him to call the police, which he did and waited to be taken into custody. After his arrest, he stated, "I just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma." He testified to killing his grandpa so he wouldn't have to see his dead wife and would be angry after seeing what he did. Donald Lund, a psychiatrist who interviewed Kemper in his adulthood, said, in his way, he had avenged his rejection of both his father and his mother. These crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, being sent to Atascadero State Hospital in San Luis Obispo County, which houses mentally ill convicts. Several youth authority psychiatrists disagreed with the court's diagnosis that he didn't express any evidence of bizarre thinking or interference with thought. When measuring his IQ, it came up to 136, which is over 2 standard deviations above average. He was then re-diagnosed with the less severe condition, which was a personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. He later tested his IQ again, getting a higher score at 145. He was seen as a model prisoner and was trained to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. He was said to develop new tests and even new scales on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, specifically on the Overt Hostility Scale. So he's like performing psychiatric tests on other inmates. He said that this gave him a better understanding on how to manipulate his psychiatrist.
You're crazy. You're crazy.
He was released on his 21st birthday on December 18th, 1969. He was released into the care of his loving mother, who had also remarried and taken the surname of Strandberg, only to be divorced again. While living with his mom, Kemper attended community college in accordance with his parole and had hoped to become a police officer, but he was rejected based on his size, which again, 6'9", gave him the nickname Big Ed. When he saved enough money, he moved to live with a friend in Alameda, where he still complained about not getting away from his mother, with all the frequent phone calls and sudden visits. He had financial difficulties, which did lead him back to his mother's apartment oftentimes. He eventually met a student from Turlock High School who he became engaged with in March 1973. The engagement was broken off after Kemper's second arrest, and her name was not released due to her parents' request. As he was driving around town one day, he noticed a large number of young women hitchhiking, which led him to store plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs in his car. It began with picking some of the women up and peacefully letting them go. According to Kemper, he picked up roughly 150 women before feeling homicidal sexual urges, calling them little zappies.
What the fuck?
And began acting on them.
That's crazy.
So he gets little zappies. Between May of 1972 and April of 1973, Kemper killed 8 women. Now this is where things get brutal, so just a trigger warning. These women would be picked up, taken to an isolated area where he would shoot, stab, smother, or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home, where he decapitated them, performed sexual acts with their heads, and then their bodies, and then dismember them. On May 7th, 1972, Kemper picked up 2 18-year-old hitchhikers from Fresno State University named Mary Ann Pesci and Anita Mae Luchessa under the pretense of taking them to Stanford University. He drove for about an hour, reaching a secluded area in the woods near Alameda. At this point, he handcuffed Pesci and locked Luchessa in the trunk, stabbing and strangling Pesci to death, then killing Luchessa in a similar manner. Kemper confessed later that when handcuffing Pesci, he brushed the back of his hand against one of her breasts, which embarrassed him. He said something along the lines of, "Whoops, I'm sorry," despite moving on to murder her only minutes later.
What the?
He put both bodies in the trunk and returned home to his apartment. On the way home, he was stopped by a police officer for a broken taillight, but he did not detect the corpses in the trunk. Can you imagine being that cop and later finding out that you pulled over?
You done fucked up, man.
Really? Seriously, though. With his roommate not being home, he brought the bodies in, where he photographed them and had sex with their bodies before dismembering them. He stuffed them into plastic bags, which he then abandoned near Loma Prieta Mountain. He admitted to performing sexual acts on their dismembered heads one last time before disposing of them in the ravine. Later that year in August, Pesci's skull was found on Loma Prieta Mountain, but no other body parts were found. The names of the rest of his hitchhiking victims are Aiko Koo, Cindy Shaw, Rosalind Thorpe, and Allison Liu. Kemper sometimes kept the severed heads for days or weeks for various horrible acts, saying, "The head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy. You know, the head is where everything is at. The brain, the eyes, mouth, that's the person. I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. The body is nothing after the head is cut off." Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head. He eventually brought the victims back to his mother's house, where he would engage in activities with their bodies before discarding them elsewhere. On April 20th, 1973, after coming home from a party, 52-year-old Clarnell Strandberg, his mother, woke Kemper up on her arrival. She was lying in her bed reading a paperback book and noticed her son enter from the room. This is where the recording came in. She said, "I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." To which he replied, "No. Good night." He waited for her to fall back asleep, then snuck back into her room and bludgeoned her to death with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife. He removed her head and performed his disgusting acts with it, then using it as a dartboard.
We're ended on a dark note.
He said he put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour, then threw darts at it, and ultimately smashed her face in. He cut out her tongue and larynx, putting them in the garbage disposal. The disposal couldn't break down the vocal cords and ejected the tissue back into the sink. To which he said, "That seemed appropriate, as much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years." He hid his mom's body in the closet and went to get a drink at a nearby bar. When he got back, he invited his mom's best friend over, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor, or Sally, Hallett, for dinner and to watch a movie. When she arrived, he strangled her to death in order to create a story that his mother and her had gone on a vacation away together. He put Hallett's corpse in a closet and left a note to the police that read, "Approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do!" 3 exclamation points.
Hey, you get a burger from McDonald's.
He then fled the scene, driving nonstop to Pueblo, Colorado, taking caffeine pills to remain awake. He stocked up with 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammo, thinking that he was the target of a manhunt. But after hearing absolutely no news, he found a phone booth and called the police. He confessed to the murders, but police didn't take his call seriously and told him to call back later. He called several hours later, again confessing to these murders, and police showed up to arrest him. He then confessed to killing the 6 students. When asked why he turned himself in, he said, "The original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing, and at the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, I just said to hell with it and called it all off." Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder on May 7, 1973. Due to his explicit and detailed confession, his counsel's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges. Kemper tried twice to commit suicide in custody, but his trial went ahead on October 23, 1973. He was interviewed under truth serum and relayed to the court that he had engaged in cannibalism by removing pieces of flesh from his victims' legs, cooking them up. It was determined that Kemper was fully cognizant in each case and that he enjoyed every prospect. Kemper was first eligible for parole in 1979. He was denied parole that year, as well as at parole hearings in 1980, 81, and 82. He subsequently waived his right to a hearing in 85. He was denied parole at his 1988 hearing, where he said, "Society is not ready in any shape or form for me. I cannot fault them for that." He was denied parole again in 91 and in 94. He then waived his right to a hearing in 97 and in 2002. He attended the next hearing in 2007, where he was again denied parole. Prosecutor I can't say it. It's like the walkout balcony. Prosecutor Ariadne Simmons. I can't fucking talk.
Walk out, ball.
Walk out. Prosecutor Ariadne Simmons said, "We don't care how much of a model prisoner he is because of the enormity of his crimes." Kemper waived his right to a hearing again in 2012. He was denied parole in 2017 and is next eligible in 2024. So next year. So that's Ed Kemper.
Wow. Well,
what a crazy
folks
story.
We're looking to leave at a high note after this podcast. We apologize.
Think again.
Yeah.
When you're covering serial killers, it's not really like a good note, man.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you jumping in with our brand new series. Hopefully you stick with us all the way through the end because we've got 50 states. And I think on this list there's also the District of Columbia, so it'll be 51.
Hell yeah.
But as always, we want to throw out the fact that we do have our Buzzsprout subscription services. If you do want to support the show, it will always remain free to those who want to listen. But if you do want to add some extra support, we would greatly appreciate it. We'll post the link in the comments below. Thank you to our 3 subscribers now, the Conklin family, Haley and Lou. Thank you very much for your support of the show. And if you want to support us any further, again, we will put the money to good use with additional content going forward.
And if you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.